My name is Carmen McDermaid. I was born in 1932, April 17th, in Northport. I was the oldest one of 4 children, born to Russell McDermaid. My mother was Edna Rose, of the Rose family. McDermaid family my father came from a very poor family, eight brothers and 4 sisters. They were poor farmers. My mother came from money. My grandfather Rose run the canning factory in Northport, which was quite an operation back in those days, when farmers depended upon the tomato crop and the peas and gourd crop for their finances. My grandfather McDermaid was born in Scotland and bought here when he was 14 years of age, indentured to a farmer. So he worked 4 or 5 years to pay his passage over. And that farmer, when he was 14, put him in the bush the first year, snaking logs out of the bush. It was a hard life. On the other side, my mother's family, my mom was from a different era. Mom drove a car when she was 16, which was quite a thing in those days. And she picked my dad up, I think, with the car, because he rode a bicycle, and Mom had a new car, a new Essex or whatever it was they drove in those days. And my father eventually went to work at the canning factory for my grandfather Rose. When we were probably 10 or 12, we were around the factory. And it was we were like farm boys that got onto a tractor and drove a tractor when they were 10 or 12. We worked around the factory when we were 10 and 12. I mean, equipment didn't bother us, nothing scared us. It was just part of life. It was part of what we did, you know. And Dad didn't discourage it. They encouraged us being there. A gift for Christmas for me was a pair of used skates. I remember getting a pair of used skates. It never fit me very well, but I didn't dare say, Dad or Mom, I don't like these skates, because they were used skates. They bought them from Henley's bicycle shop in Picton, and you used them whether you wanted to or not. We get a hockey stick and a puck, and maybe a pair of gloves or something. And it's still the same. We get an orange at the bottom of your sock, at the toe of your sock, and some candy or something like that. But there wasn't. In the tree, we didn't have many lights in the early days. We had lots of decorations from my grandfather Rose, from glass ornaments and beautiful things like this. Which all disappeared later on, a few years later, when the house burnt to the ground and we lost everything. Everything. Nothing left. Not a thing. So all the things she saved from her early days were gone. Usually, Mom very rarely bought a turkey. Later on in life, maybe a bit, but in the early days, we would have a couple chickens running around, big capons, and we'd chop the head off one and pluck it, and that was, rather than turkey at Christmas, we had chicken. And I'm no lover of turkey today. I give me a good piece of chicken. If it's right, I'd rather eat a piece of chicken than turkey any day. But cranberry sauce. Mom was great with mince meat pie, and I still love it today. Some people think it's terrible, but I still love it today. I love mince meat. And Christmas time, that was part, and plum pudding was another one with sauce on it, some kind of sugar sauce on the brown. But lots of potatoes, lots of vegetables. My father died when I was about 16, and the first year was a bad Christmas, and he died in November. So come Christmas, Mother said we're going to have Christmas. So we did have Christmas. Yeah, but Christmas, the first Christmas my dad died was probably the toughest Christmas that I can recall. We went to Belleville to my uncle's. My mother had only one brother, and he was a government fruit and vegetable inspector. He had a family too, but he insisted we come there for Christmas, and we went there. Very unhappy time for me. I wasn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in my own home. I didn't feel comfortable there. Well, Grandfather Rose was employed in Picton in the canning factory business, and there was only one or two factories in those days. When a man came over from Scotland called J-Line Stocks, he wanted to invest money, and he wanted to invest in the canning factory business. The big wheel my grandfather was working for recommended my grandfather for the job. My grandfather, and I'm not sure all the details, but they picked the land in Northport, which is approximately 20 acres. There was greenhouses where they grew the plants. There was the factory. We had shipping off the dock. We shipped in wartime canned goods to England. And we grew our own tomato plants, which we let out to farmers. They put them in the field, and from that we got the produce, the tomatoes, and puree, tomato paste, and ketchup, that type of thing. This all came out of the factory. I have pictures here of the factory and what it was like at that time. A large boiler house, for quite a large factory. We'd have had 5 to 6 men in the season, working all season at the factory, and probably 100 when we started to pack, approximately 75 to 100 people when we were packing and canning. And the canning would be done by now. As soon as the frost hits, the tomatoes are done. The first year my dad died, I quit school and worked in the local grocery store a little bit. Come spring, I went into the factory. Mother run the office. Very seldom seen her in the factory. So at 17 and a half, I was given orders to run the factory. I had 4 or 5 men there in the off season where we were doing maintenance and getting ready for the pack. And they took orders from me. It didn't seem to be. You learned to be very careful, you know. But this is what we're going to do this morning, boys, and we went to work, you know. It wasn't. I never had time for a childhood. My brother had time to be a boy. My sister had time to be girls. I didn't have time for that. I immediately had to take control of the situation, whatever it may be. Mother, very seldom. If you seen her in the factory, you knew there was either a telephone call or there was a problem. She stayed in the office. Very rarely came out to the factory. to discuss it, and we discussed around the table at supper time or whatever, any problems that we had. And Mom bought us up on very little money. I remember talking about $15 a month, and I sit today and wonder at $15 a month, it wouldn't it wouldn't hardly buy my milk today. But she fed a family and bought us up on very little money. She must have had a couple thousand saved, I think, in the bank, and she kept digging into that. Life was not great in that late. I worked in the city of Toronto and sent my money home. We worked in Toronto when I went to work the first year in Toronto. I was 17, 18, I guess. To get a quick job, I pushed freight on the docks, and we call them the honkies. That's a derogatory term, but the Polish and the Ukrainians, we call them honkies. And you learn to fight and take care of yourself. I didn't have any money, so we slept 3 to a bed, and they worked nights, and the 2 guys worked nights, and I worked days. So they'd come in the morning and say, "Get out of bed and get to work. We got to get in bed." So the bed never got cold. On the weekends, I slept on the floor. They had the bed because they paid the biggest share of the rent. We had a 2-burner stove, little hot plate, and a frying pan. So you cooked a pork chop maybe and something else for the kind of get you. Our refrigerator was a crate out the window, and you left the window in the middle of the winter open a little bit so the heat from the house would go out and keep the milk from freezing solid. It would be frozen maybe, but not solid. And that's where we kept, that was our refrigerator. So, and things were, and the bathroom was down on the 2nd floor. We were on the 3rd floor. It had a big room, but it was tough going. I was in Toronto working in the fall when the house burned to the ground. And there was very little money. We lived in the barn. In the spring, we moved into a barn, and mother had a trailer bought in, and she lived in the trailer, and my brother and 2 sisters and myself slept in the barn. We had beds in there, and we had a table in there, and we had an electric stove in there, and life went on. And the people were good in those days. People would come with your house burnt, they'd have a bushel, somebody bring you a bushel of potatoes, or somebody bring you something, or pots and pans. I remember Mother going to neighbors saying, "I got potatoes, but I don't have a pot to cook them in," and things like this. She just things you remember, But yeah, it was a different world we lived in those days. Everybody helped everybody. You knew everybody's business. Everybody was friends. It wasn't like it is today, where you don't know your neighbor's name even hardly. It's a different world. The temperature has changed considerable when you think of the weather we're having today and the weather we got then. My brother and I was married October the 15th, both of us, approximately that time, him before me. But the factory was closed by then. So it gives you, I keep track of the weather from the days of the canning factory. Well, I think back now of the weather. I look out today, and it's a beautiful day. You think of your childhood. Your feet was always cold. You had rubber boots or rubber something or other, I remember when felt shoes came, and they were a great thing. We thought they were wonderful, but your feet were still damn cold. Woolen socks, gloves with leather outside and knitted inside. Wasn't too bad till the leather got soaking wet. and then the knitted drummers got wet, and your hands were cold. Cold, you were always cold, seemed to me. You were cold in the house, you were cold outside. There was no central heat, really. You stood right on top of the stove to get warm, you know. You had a coal stove in the one room, and a wood stove in the other, and a cooking stove in the kitchen, you know, a big old cooking stove. Lots of wood to lug in, lots of coal to lug in. So the heating in the houses were not like they are today. No insulation. Most of them didn't have double windows or thermal pane or anything like that, so it was cold. That's the part I remember, waking up in the morning in your bed. You didn't want to go to bed because it was cold in the bedroom. It was warm in bed, but it was damn cold in the bedroom. Trying to get dressed, your clothes were cold, everything. That's all I remember about that. And I remember one Christmas, uh, before Dad died, we came downstairs, and there was our Christmas time, so there were gifts. You were all excited. You were running around looking and looking. And all of a sudden we realized there was a white live rabbit under the tree. And Sandy had bought a white rabbit. This rabbit stayed with us, and it was our pet, and it was out with the chickens, and it would be in the garden all summer long. You couldn't miss it. It was white in every place you could see it, in the grass, in the garden, wherever it was. This old white rabbit lived, I don't know if it was male or female, but it lived for years and years. Never had any young ones, so we're not sure what it was all about, but it was a fun thing to get at Christmas time. That was a fun thing.
Yeah.